Well, welcome everybody. Pastor Tim Carscadden here. I'll be joined by Zach Carscadden in a minute. Eric Lawley, our producer today. We're so glad you're with us. It is Monday, the 10th day. I'm not sorry, the 9th day of February, 2026. And the pipeline report is here. We are going to talk about the U.S. Iran negotiations because I think this is probably one of the most critical things happening in the world right now because it can determine the entire balance of the Middle East. It can deal with terrorism. It can deal with so many things. There's so many factors playing a role. And so we want you to be informed so you can pray accordingly and that we can see God's will be done here. We're dealing with principalities, powers, and we have got to be the answer, the ecclesia, the one who prays accordingly and hears from heaven on what to do on this issue. So we're going to give you some key revelation, I think. Oh, it's going to help you in your prayer life, and also as we go with the pipeline report, it'll help us move forward. We also have obviously our domestic issues that's going on here right now with the voter ID battle. The battle still going on in Minnesota, Chicago, also Los Angeles with the ICE, and a lot of factors that are playing a role in there, which is a stability issue, which leads us into the midterms, which is we're going to be heading into. We hope to the rest of this year on the pipeline to make sure each week we talk about midterms because there's so many things on the ballot across all 50 states. Some states have more than others, but welcome you today. We're going to get into the pipeline report. Thanks for joining us. Again, welcome. Thanks for joining us here on this Monday, 12 noon Central Time. I think about how long we've been doing this. We started back in COVID 2020. We were doing, at that time, we were doing 6 days a week of coming to you at 12 noon Central. And some of you have been with us for the entire time. Thank you for partnering with us and praying. We had so many issues at that time. We had the election, as well as all the COVID crisis. And so we had a lot to say every day at this time as well. We weren't as busy back then doing other things, so we had more time to come online. So that's how long this pipeline's been here. Some of you new viewers, if you don't know, this came out of a dream I had where the Lord spoke to me about the election and moving forward, and then how we needed to get a pipeline and to get this word out to intercessors across America and anybody else that wants to pray for our nation. And so that's what we've been doing. And you're part of the pipeline. You're in the pipeline. That's a better way of putting it. And so we try to give you the revelation God's given us and then help you. I noticed many other ministries are doing this now. I'm not saying we were the pioneers, but there are many others that do this. I know Mario Murillo does one. It's really good as well. I'll try to listen to it every week when I get a chance. Does exactly what we do here, just trying to bring revelation and then play clips and kind of give you an insight as to what's being said out there by political arena, by ministers and by others that are part of this, praying for America, praying for the purpose of America. And here we are right now with the Iranian crisis. And so we have a pretty big issue. Zach, I'll welcome you on with me here today. And we want to talk a little bit. We have shared on this pipeline show many times that our concerns about the negotiators, Jared Kushner and Scott Witkoff, and because they have other agendas. And I realize President Trump respects them and they've done some amazing work. I'm not here to say they have not, especially with the Abrahamic Accords and others. But they do have an agenda. Number one, the baseline agenda that I struggle with the most, and I've shared it here before, is they do believe and do want a two-state solution for Israel. That has never been hidden from them. They've always hidden from us about them. They've been open about that. When my lobbying days in Washington, we were told, briefed in detail, how Jared Kushner was meeting with Mahmoud Abbas, the leader of the Palestinian Authority, negotiating territories to divide the land of Israel. So this is where it's a bit intercessory wise. We've got to engage because he's in the White House. He has a voice and he has the ear of the president concerning that issue. So underlying issue with Iran, with Gaza, with Lebanon, with all these other nations that he's a part of, the underlying issue is he is probably, he's done in the past, is negotiating with that platform that our goal is to divide Israel. So when we see that, we know that our land will be cursed for that action. So we have a little bit of nervousness of some of these negotiations that he's going to be a part of. So just keep that in mind when we talk about him. So Zach, what do you say on that?
Yeah, and he has when he left the administration the last time, he took some funding from some sovereign funds out of the Middle East that questionably compromise his stance on how things to move forward, all in the guise of the Abrahamic Accords. And while it moves things in the right direction, you have the answer of where do you lie on the instance of Israel. And even though he's an American Jew and has a lot of ties there, and Trump even talks about how his daughter Ivanka ended up becoming Jewish because of him, so now they're considered Jewish, and the kids and everything, and so he considers part of the family, etc. things, which can be positive, but also at the same time is one thing we have to worry. And this happened to some of the greatest presidents, is towards the end of their second term they start to cave because they want to be remembered for something in their eyes, and they think this is the way to do it. And so the prayer would be, and the focus would be, to pray for President Trump to be strong and let him, being as he was the one elected, be able to make these decisions and not be influenced into making a decision of compromise for prestige sake in the air of performance. And so right now this option is on the table. We could get into some other things there, but the reality is they're negotiating towards peace. But the question is will Trump, because he's put the red line out there like Obama did, will he waffle on it, as it seems like he is doing right now with Iran in the protests and how they've handled their own people. So this is a challenge for Trump right now and for the world, because if Trump is not going to hold the red line that he put out there, and he's supposedly this strong president, then they know moving forward that any president who pretends to put a red line out there is going to back down if Trump backs down. So this doesn't just affect this presidency in the U.S. now, but it affects future presidencies and the way the Middle East and people of those ilk view American politicians moving forward.
Okay, so let's break down what's going on here in the land. This is from Fox News and their take on this. Jack Keane, former general, talks about this.
Well, I think a deal can be reached. Well, you have to get in position. We have plenty of time. If you remember Venezuela, we waited around for a while, and we're in no rush. I think we had the results today were with Iran. It was a meeting. We're going to meet again early next week. And they want to make a deal, Iran, as they should want to make a deal. They know the consequences if they don't make a deal. The consequences are very steep. So we'll see what happens.
And President Trump giving a positive assessment of talks between the U.S. and Iran last week, but the president also sounding a note of caution if a deal is not ultimately reached. It all comes amid a buildup of U.S. military assets in the Middle East. So let's untangle this with retired General Jack Keane. He's a Fox News senior strategic analyst. Sir, before we get your take on this, Ambassador Michael Huckabee trying to explain why this is bigger than Israel.
Americans need to understand Iran's threat is not about Israel. It's about America. They've been saying death to America for 47 years. President Trump is just that. He's President Trump. He is not President Chump. He's not going to allow the Ayatollah to continue to play this along and somehow act like that he will never take action. He's already proven he will take action when he needs to, and when he does, it will not be mild.
Okay, let's pause there because I want to speak into this a little bit about Huckabee, which is very important. Governor Huckabee Ambassador Huckabee, could be on this show with us. He has the same view pretty much we do as well. So let's pray for him, especially that his point of view would have a voice as much as Jared Kushner's and Witkoff's. If you saw in that video when President Trump's on the plane, Witkoff's right there in the back. So you know that this is a constant conversation that they're having, and we need another voice. And I think Ambassador Huckabee can be that voice. So just remember that. I'll continue the video, but I want us to pray for him especially, okay? Let's play the rest of this.
General, what is your assessment of the situation now?
Yeah, well, certainly we're in a phase here that we've seen play out before with the Trump administration, and that is when he has a potential conflict with an adversary, is offering him a diplomatic way out of that before the execution of it. We saw it back prior to the June operation, Midnight Hammer, to destroy Iran's nuclear capability, and prior to the commencing the war that Israel did, diplomatic overtures were made to Iran, and they refused them, and the result was the 12-day war and the United States' very successful operation. Same thing happened in Venezuela with Maduro, and that diplomatic option is being offered to Iran right now. I think Iran's motivations in this are kind of twofold. One, to drag out these negotiations as much as possible. And the advantage they see in doing that is it puts off the military operation itself and enables them to better prepare to defend against it, and also to be able to retaliate as a result of it. And then the second thing Iran has, and this is major motivation for them, is to make some kind of a deal with the Americans that would grant them sanction relief. Admittedly, it would likely be condition-based, based on their complying with the deal itself. But that is clearly what their objective is. And the reason for that is, as we have reported here time and again, their economy is in the tank. With this, no hope of recovery. And that is why the people are in the streets and really want a new regime, because they know this regime is not capable of changing the quality of their life experience. So that's where we are. I actually, even if we got a deal that's favorable to us, Dana and Bill, I think the preferred option is a military one, because if we get a deal with the Iranians, we know a couple of things. One, they're going to cheat. Two, they're not going to stop destabilizing the Middle East. They will continue to support their proxies, and they will continue to be aggressive against Israel, which may warrant even more military conflict, as a result of that. That's who the Iranians are. They'll continue to export terrorism itself, and they will cheat. We know they will cheat because we've been with them for 4+ decades. So I don't think it's a good option to extend the life.
Okay, so and we're probably in agreement with the general there, big time on that issue. Okay, am I unmuted? There we go. We're in agreement with the general on that issue, because we know their history. They do cheat. They do not keep their word. They are going to continue all this. They are stalling. We know all that. And I think this is where you can only keep your military on readiness for so long. The tension is there. So this is where they're going to have to make a decision pretty soon. Now, biblically, when we look at President Trump and what he's doing, Israel was always told to offer peace before they brought war. So in a sense, I think that's where the favor of God can be on America, because we are offering peace. We know their response is going to be, but nonetheless, you still offer it. And then I think that brings grace over our military and brings grace over America. So that I'm thankful for. And we'll get into some of the specifics in the land, but that I think that's something that we got to pray into accordingly, that we recognize and not be deceived, and not be deceived by the deal. Because President Trump loves to make deals, and we don't want him to be deceived, because this could be a deal.
Yeah, and if you look at what his words, and even in the clip you played earlier, he talks about how, look, even before Venezuela, we took our time. And he seems to be taking a little bit longer time, maybe because we're paying attention more specifically to this case than we did the Venezuela one. But the reality is okay, if he's saying, and he's bringing up Venezuela, that kind of lets the Iranians know, like, hey, we waited, we gave them time, we're going to give you time, we're going to get our assets in position, but then like there's a possibility of action. And I think he's weighing the counteract of, okay, if he does this, what does China and Russia do, et cetera? How does this make him look, et cetera? He does like to, he's a very analytical person. He likes to take things in. I know he comes off as different, but he loves to listen to his military people. And I think to your point of, being on the alert and having American troops on the alert, but it's also Israel who he's kind of having to listen to as well. And so that kind of plays a key role there. Where do they stand? What do they want to do? But then also is they may or may not, you don't really know, with the Mossad is they may have assets in the region who are gathering intel to really see where they're at and what do they want to take out, do they need to take out certain things, et cetera, things. But then once you take them out, what happens then? Because this has always been the biggest question when I'm reading Israeli news and reading sourcing there is, okay, you take them out, but then what? Who comes in? And I think that's a bigger question for the Iranian people that they need to figure out. And I think what this administration is learning through the Venezuela situation is, okay, you take them out, but then again, who steps in? So it brings into the realities of, okay, if there are any lessons to be learned from Venezuela, this may be where they're kind of delaying and waiting for things to play out, which can be wisdom, but also at the same time is it's going to have a long-term effect. But there's also and I'll end on this and I'll toss it back to you. There's a strategy within negotiations with countries like this where they negotiate peace when they're weak, but when they're strong, they attack. So they're not attacking right now, but what they're doing is they're delaying peace. And a lot of the peace deals that Iran and the U.S. are negotiating are between 1 and 3 years, basically till the end of Trump's term. So they know, okay, let's just delay as long as possible, obstruct as long as possible, and then when the next president comes in, then we can kind of have free game to do what we want. Because one of the things that did happen is, okay, with the Iran attack and the bombing that the U.S. did was, okay, we took out the nuclear facilities of them being able to create a nuclear weapon immediately. The long term is what they didn't do. They didn't take the knowledge base away. So the knowledge base is still there, and the possibility is still there. It's just the capability of acting out on said knowledge is delayed right now. And so could they be delaying to be able to build back up? Do they have other facilities that they need to build back up in the future? That I think is up in the air right now. Maybe the IDF and Mossad know, the U.S. military knows, but the reality is I think that's what they're kind of waiting for and waiting on to figure out what's best for those in the region, but also more importantly, the Iranian people themselves.
Okay, so just a little commentary here about what's going on in the land before we play another clip here. First of all, the IRGC, Iranian Guard here, who are the ones who are killing the people on the streets, some estimates 40,000 plus. I noticed this weekend there was a storage facility that they said was where they were keeping the bodies that caught on fire and was burned up, burning the evidence up. Now, our intel sources tell us that in the land, these are from Iranians, are getting word out, that what happens is if you want the body of your child or somebody, your family member, you go to get the body because you want to do a proper burial. You sign a confession, and there's other proof of this out there. You sign a confession that your family member was a member of the IRGC. In other words, they were part of the Iranian Guards, and that they were killed by the protesters. So now they have these confessions, and then they tell the world that these protesters are killing their guards. Okay, this is how you get your body back. So the people are agreeing to it because they want their family member's body, and they want to do a proper burial. So that's what's going on the ground. The IRGC, these are, they're not just Iranians. They're not just the Iranian police. We're finding out now that many of them are jihadists from Iraq, from Syria, from Hezbollah, and they have come to Iran to volunteer to work in this wrap-up of trying to get these protesters off the streets. So these aren't really Iranians killing Iranians. They're the jihadists from other countries that have come in, or hired hands, if you want to put it that way, that are taking out these people. These are some things that we know that's going on the ground. That's sad, but that's a reality. The vacuum that Zach just talked about is the question: is what's going to happen? We know the former prince is in the wings, waiting to come back in, but he may not have a coalition within the country, and this is the problem. It's the same thing that happened in Venezuela. The woman that lost the election, that went into exile in Europe, the President Trump just didn't want to put her back in because her coalition is not in Venezuela; it's outside of Venezuela. So that doesn't help you. You need support within the country. So the question is, does the prince have support within the country? And we don't know that. How do you poll that? That's a big question, is how do you find that answer? You don't know. So it could be that if we overthrow the regime, then the jihadists that are already there will see that vacuum and go in. And the last thing, I was talking to an Iranian yesterday, that one thing that's been said is that all the Middle East, all the other countries in the Middle East, especially that are run by Islamic regimes, they do not want to see Ayatollah fall, because if the Ayatollah falls and the Islamic regime falls and it's replaced by democracy or something else, then they know their country's leadership is under threat. Because remember the Arab Spring, it was a failure, but it did accomplish a few things, Egypt being one of them, where the Islamic regime was removed and a basic democracy was put in its place. So they see the handwriting on the wall. That's why they're not allowing us to fly over their airspace, et cetera, because they do not want to see the Ayatollah fall, because it could be the end of their regimes as well. So this is the dynamics of what's going on in the region. You want to say anything, Zach? You good?
Yeah, I think the one dynamic there is not only to that, but like, where do U.S. interests lie as far as even within the administration? Because I think they're divided. I think that's something that we have to play into this, is because you have even some within the Trump administration, take Jared Kushner, for example, who has these partnerships here, and you have ties within J.D. Vance's camp who have similar ties as well. And so they have an allegiance to play both sides to a degree, and I think that's where we need to pray for Trump and Marco Rubio and et cetera, and those who are involved in this negotiation, because you have those who are trying to create an agenda, and it seems good in the forefront. It all seems good. Oh, we don't want to go to war, but in put troops on the ground, and I can agree with that to a point and understand that to a point, and I think that's a very tough call for President Trump. I mean, I know people get mad at George W. and Dick Cheney for Iraq, but the reality is that's a tough decision that somebody has to live with, and what does that mean? I think that's what they're weighing here. So we have to understand, we're like, oh, let's take them out, and there are a lot of pro-Israeli proponents who are like, let's do it, because they understand the magnitude of it, but President Trump is also weighing the magnitude of the importance of not doing it, and how do we navigate this without putting troops on the ground. And you have to honor him for that, to a degree, and understand that, like, look, he's going to have to live with this for the foreseeable future, but then he also knows his kids are going to have to live with that. What does that mean for his family, etc.? I'm not saying, like, he should make those decisions solely because of that. We want to pray he hears the wisdom from the Lord on that, and so does the administration there on that, and that's one of the things that they're weighing. But I think more importantly, what his focus has been is, look, what about the people of Iran? Where do they lie? Where are those who disagree with the leadership there, who are around the world, who would love to go back, but they know the reality of what it means to live there, loss of freedom, loss of life, etc., and they just didn't want to live under that. And you can honor them and respect them for that decision, but the reality is Trump's weighing this, and then the ripple effect of, okay, when you cut this head off, what does it mean for the rest? And then will it be an outright, because I don't know if you want to talk about this, what the response for Israel is and why they're on heightened alert. I think that's kind of key for us to also play into this as well and understand as well, I should say.
Yeah, we'll get to that. I'll say this, that peace through strength is the policy of President Trump, and it was the policy of Ronald Reagan, and it's why it worked, and it worked with Iran. Now, I'm old enough to know when Jimmy Carter was president, hostages were taken by the Iranian regime, the Islamic regime that's there now. And the reason that they could do that, because they knew we had a weak president, Carter. he was very predictable. They knew what he would do and what he would not do. So therefore, they knew they could do anything they wanted when they held these hostages, our hostages, U.S. hostages there. Now, when I was lobbying for the Iran nuclear deal, a former ambassador of Iran was one of our mentors and equipping us to go talk to our senators and congressmen. And when he was in Tehran when this all happened, and he said the saying was, and I've shared it here before, was what is green and glows. That was the term all around Tehran. And they said that's Tehran when President Reagan becomes president. And so they knew he was going to nuke them. And that's the fear that they had. And they did this. I pulled a blast from the past. This is an old newscast from when President Reagan was inaugurated. And this is what happened. Many of you may not even know about this.
Now, day one of Ronald Reagan's presidency, and day one of freedom for 52 Americans. Though thousands of miles apart, these two historic events moved almost on parallel tracks today. The new president had not been in office an hour when the former hostages became free men and women again.
It wasn't until the motorcade on their way to the Capitol that the president was able to tell the president-elect that the hostages were aboard planes and would be airborne in 15 or 20 minutes. But it would be longer. Finally, just before Mr. Carter got to Andrews Air Force Base for his trip home to Plains, the hostages' departure was officially confirmed. They had taken off about a half an hour after he was no longer president. The timing could hardly have been accidental.
They have aged, said the ambassador, and he referred specifically to the charge d'affaires, Bruce Langan, an old friend of his at Will. It was childlike, the ambassador said. They, the hostages, couldn't quite believe they were leaving, but they were falling all over each other with emotion. There was laughing, and there were tears. Many, perhaps most, had not seen each other for those 14 months. It was, said Ambassador Lang, a moment that will stay with me for the rest of my life.
The two American Nightingales, which will carry the hostages on the next leg of their voyage, arrived here at Algiers Airport tonight. These medical evacuation planes...
And I know that's a blast from the past, but that's the story of what happened. And because of the strength of President Reagan, they yielded those hostages immediately. And this is where President Trump, I want us to pray that he will display this strength right now. Otherwise, these people, these innocent people in Iran will continue to be killed, and we will see more terrorism in the region. This is bigger than we realize. We're dealing with the Prince of Persia. We're also dealing with Israel and its preparedness. We are told by people in Israel today that they're at the most heightened security moment in the history of Israel, that the people are being warned. This is could be the most dangerous thing that has ever happened to the land of Israel. There are estimates that Iran could send upwards of 5,000 drones against them, the same type of drones that were sent that were used in the Ukraine war that they're sending to Russia. So can they withstand 5,000 drones coming in? There is a new weapon, the Iron Beam, which they believe can knock down some drones, maybe all of them. We don't know, which would be awesome, because otherwise they're going to have a very difficult time intercepting that many. So this is why we think this is such an important topic today, to spend a whole day on it, talking about these issues, because Israel's safety and security is at stake, and ours of standing with God's covenant people is at stake as well. So this is the stakes are extremely high. That's my point. And we want to agree with what God is saying concerning this issue.
Yeah, and I think that's well said. And you also have coming up negotiations on the peace board about Hamas and what happens in Gaza. It's the 19th of February that's coming up. So we have that to look forward to next week. But President Trump is going to meet with Benjamin Netanyahu, Prime Minister Netanyahu, before on the 18th, because Netanyahu has agreed to be a part of this board. And part of this negotiation is about Hamas dismantling. Well, if Iran gets in a position of where they're going to be taken out, what do they try to get Hamas to do in the south, in Gaza? What do they try to get Hezbollah to do in the north? Maybe some negotiations elsewhere for things. And then there's also U.S. bases in the region. So this is wide affecting here in regards to this topic and for everybody in the Middle East.
And here, they are going to have a meeting this Wednesday. Here's what this is going to be about. We'll give you an update on this.
Hey, good morning to you, Brian, Lawrence, and Ainsley. So that meeting between Netanyahu and Trump has been moved up by a whole week. It's a very urgent meeting now, and the dust up over negotiations seems to be over the ballistic missiles program that Iran has. This is a statement from Benjamin Netanyahu's office. It says the prime minister believes that all negotiations must include limiting the ballistic missiles and ending support for the Iranian access, and that is in regards to Tehran's support for those militant groups, including Hezbollah in Lebanon and Hamas in the Palestinian territories. It comes after Friday's talks in which Iran's foreign minister drew a red line and said that they do not want to talk about their ballistics. You'll remember Israel took out a significant amount of Iran's ballistic missiles last year, and last month, Netanyahu said that if Iran tries to build up again, Israel will have to, quote, knock them down. Despite all of this, President Trump, at least on Friday after these talks in Oman, felt that Iran will come to a deal.
Yeah, there's a deal that would be acceptable, but the one thing, and right up front, no nuclear weapons. If we could have made that deal 2 years ago, we would have made that deal, but they weren't willing to do that. Now they are willing to do it. So they're willing to do much more than they would have a year and a half ago.
If they're not willing to, the president says strikes are very much still on the table. Iranian foreign minister responding to that. If the U.S. attacks us, it is evident that we don't have the ability and access to attack U.S. territory and therefore have to attack or retaliate the U.S. bases in the region. Are strikes inevitable?
I don't know that they're inevitable, but if
His opinion on that, and we don't need to cover all that. But I think the point on this is clear. What the Lord is saying. I mean, what they're saying on this issue. And I think Netanyahu is right on this issue. Ballistic missiles. I probably should get a map of showing you some of their intercontinental ballistic missiles ability. It can go all the way to northern Europe, almost all the way to Africa and beyond, India. They have a range. Now, whether they'll be successful with warheads, we don't know. But the fact is that that's what they have capacity and capability of, and the world needs to recognize this. Again, I think this could be a toppling moment for the entire region, and we could see a major shift in the entire region and watch peace come at some level. I know it's temporary. It will not last because the scriptures clearly tell us that. But we could see a real opportunity here for transformation. And for me and for all of us as believers, we have to have a heart for the Iranian people and what is happening to them. And remember, the Persian people are special people to the heart of the Father because they once held the Jewish people during the time of Esther and others. So they kept them alive in order to fulfill prophetic purposes. Take care of that. Iran has been invaded by Arabs, Islamic Arabs who are invading their country. At one time, they were not a part of the demographic of Iran. It was a different group of people. They were Indo-European people. They were not Arabic people at all. And so when we think of Iran, we think of Arabs, but that's not really the people group that's there originally. Now they're being invaded by them. And so that is where has changed the entire way that Iran operates now because of that. So let's pray they get back to their redemptive purpose. This is back to why we have borders. And why we protect our borders is because you don't want to lose your DNA, your call, your prophetic call as a nation. And Iran has lost its call as a nation because it has allowed immigration and allowed these groups to come in. And now they're dominating because, listen, we have a seven mountain teaching that we've talked about before. So do the Muslims. And so do what they do. They want to take over every sphere of society. And that is what they have done. Everybody in the Arab world looks at Iran as the utopia of what a nation can be when it's ruled by Islamic regime. So when we pull it down, we can pull down some other things when we do that. There you go, Zach. Good talk about that.
Here's a map. And one of the things that's interesting about this is, okay, you look at it and you see where they can kind of distance themselves off into. And let's say this map is wrong. Let's say they can shoot further. And let's say they can only shoot half of this, let's say they are in some other hemisphere of the world, and this is the administration's concern, is saying like, okay, let's say they've done this in Iran, but then unknown vessels and unknown cartridges of what have gone to Venezuela, Central America, Nicaragua, etc. Has it reached Cuba? 90 miles outside of South Florida and Miami, the tip of Key West. That's a very real concern there as far as this technology seeping out and getting out, and we don't know. That's the issue, and we understand that Rubio and the administration has somewhat of a grasp on it, but there's always the information, the saying that goes, you don't know what you don't know. And the reality is this is a major concern for this administration of the far-reaching capabilities of Iran. Well, let's say they post up in with Hezbollah in Lebanon, up north of Israel. Okay, if they have this range, they could definitely do some damage there, one, to Israel, but then the question is what if they wanted to go further elsewhere? So this is a major concern, and why we want to emphasize the importance of this. I mean, if you remember the movies, the Red Dawn, Russia invading the U.S. and et cetera, things like that. And it's just more of a play on Americans' minds of, look, this could possibly happen. I mean, they've done The Man in the High Castle on Prime about what the world would look like if Japan or Germany would have won World War II, et cetera. And they're good thought exercises to have played out and to see and to have people understand the ramifications of what could be. But think of the ramifications of what could be under this. I mean, history in Europe would tell us especially like with Portugal, Spain, and France, of there, and even in northern Africa. So we've seen this played out, and I think that's something that people want to prevent there, and why we're praying for our leaders now to make the proper decision and understand the ramifications of who we're dealing with here.
And here's one last clip. This is from Israel on their negotiations and their point of view on the negotiations. Hopefully this thing doesn't pop up ads. If it does, hang in there.
Of these negotiations, the fact that they're taking place in Oman, despite earlier reports and statements that they would be taking place in Turkey, could that have any impact on how these talks are conducted?
Yes, definitely. And that's why the Iranians wanted to be in Oman and not in Turkey. After all, Turkey wanted to invite other players in the region, the Saudis, the Emiratis, the Qataris. Everybody in these countries doesn't want to see at least the issue of the proxies not being solved in these negotiations. The issue of proxies is affecting everybody in the region, and maybe the ballistic missiles as well. The other reason here is the fact that Oman has always been the back channel between the U.S. and Iran, and it seems to be more neutral. It's not a NATO member, right, like Turkey, and it wouldn't be affected in any war or future war, because a future war or future collapse of the regime would trigger a refugee crisis, and Turkey doesn't want that to happen, especially after what happened in Syria, and that they finally could solve the issue of the refugees, of the Syrian refugees specifically. And also, they don't want to see Israel as the only strong, powerful nation in the Middle East. They want Iran to be there to somehow balance Israel. So the Turks don't seem to be very neutral here. And after all, they are their rivals in Syria. They were the ones that defeated them in Syria. So that's why they wanted to be in Oman, and also because they want to focus on the issue of the nuclear capabilities of Iran and nothing else. There has been some reports, I would say, that suggested that the first phase of this will be the focus on the nuclear issue, but later on, the other issues will be opened. I haven't heard that publicly from Iranian officials, and that could be the case, because after all, the Iranians has already made a concession, and not everybody's mentioning this, because the Iranians, after the 12 days war, said that we will not negotiate with the Americans unless they guarantee that they will not strike us, and we will not go into negotiations under threat. What's happening right now is actually Abraham Lincoln aircraft carrier is just off the coast of Iran. Trump is saying publicly that unless they agree to our terms, we will attack them, meaning that the Iranians already made a concession.
Okay, so there you go. That's where we are with this issue, and I think he brought up a great point. That was the Obama doctrine which is that he didn't want Israel to be the only strong party in the region. That's why he allowed Iran to enrich uranium, because he felt that they should have a nuclear weapon to balance Israel out in the region. And as a Muslim, which he was, you understand why he wants his whatever his friends in the region to have an edge, or at least what they feel a protection against Israel. The problem is Israel's never going to threaten those other nations. They're not going to shoot weapons at them randomly like they're being shot at by other nations. That's the hypocrisy of that doctrine. It doesn't work. It's not making any sense whatsoever. But when you get a Islamic spirit and you get this spirit in the land, you understand the deception that comes with that, and that's what that's all about.
Yeah, and this is good Trump right here, of saying, look, we're gonna have these negotiations, and we're gonna have them based on my terms here, and that's one of the things that I think has been missing and involved in these negotiations. And now the question becomes, kind of behind the scenes, is okay, Trump's making this move, but then when you have Witkoff and Kushner and all these other people in the room, how are they actually aligning with him? Because what you're hearing from Rubio and Vance is they're kind of getting in, step in line and foot with Trump and where he's taking it, and they're publicly saying things, but we're not really hearing much from Witkoff. We're not really hearing much from Kushner, and Kushner's kind of put himself in a position to be protected from that, and that's an area of concern there. And I think the Iranians know that. They're very smart negotiators involved in this, and so they understand what's at play here, and there's obviously the spiritual aspect behind it. But the reality is look, this is the dynamics that Trump and the administrations are playing with here. Is you kind of have good Trump being put forward of, hey, we're going to negotiate this way, but then you have bad Trump in some of the people who we believe are involved, and that's kind of the detriment of Trump of his first administration. And so we'll see how this plays out. Who gets whose voice is louder? In Venezuela, Rubio won out, and in South America, Rubio wins out, and we're seeing him kind of have rule and authority there over Kushner, because Kushner's not involved in that, and that brings major hope in those regions of the world. But here, this is where Kushner has some influence, and the reason we're highlighting this is because this is a weak link here in this administration, and I think the Iranians know that. That's one of the areas we need to pray for President Trump here, that he can see through this veil and not be so blinded by blood in this instance.
Well, and Zach brings up a great point. We have not hardly heard from Rubio on this issue. Just here and there, Jared and Witkoff have been the front people on this issue. Again, we do have a problem here, a little bit different than Iraq. When we overthrew Iraq, the regime, Saddam Hussein, we actually put troops on the ground, and we could keep the democracy somewhat intact. We cannot do that in Iran. We cannot put troops on the ground. So therefore, this is where it gets so difficult to make a decision, because if you don't have a good regime change, you could have a worse issue than before, and the slaughter could continue. So that's where we need the wisdom of God to be upon him. And I shared my dream on my podcast last Thursday about President Trump, and the weight he was emotionally worn out, not physically, because this guy's a Energizer bunny. Emotionally, he was worn out because he's trying to do good for so many people. And that is where it gets very hard on him. How does he make all these decisions? In my dream, he had taken some bad recommendations on policy, and he felt horrible because of the byproduct of that decision. So here we got to pray for him that he has good counsel, and that he has the strength emotionally to make the right decision here. This is more than a physical decision. This is an emotional decision. Any general, anybody that puts troops in harm's way and makes such a decision like that, it's one of the most difficult decisions you can ever make. Churchill did it. Eisenhower did it. Patton did it. People like that did it, and it saved the world. And I believe we can see that here as well. So as we close with that, on that topic, on a side note, a good thing that happened yesterday, if you didn't see this, Japan called snap elections which is really a real effect here, because here's what happened.
Japan, the prime minister called a snap election, the quickest snap election in Japanese history. And boy, has she had a big victory today. She's going to have 2/3 majority in the upper house. President Trump endorsed her last week. She is a great ally, great relationship with the president. And when Japan is strong, the U.S. is strong in Asia. Japan.
So this is a big one, because of course we're tied to Japan a lot. We do every Friday. We have a show from Japan. My son Jacob does that one, and as we do this is very important, because this was a real risk. But Trump's influence affected the election in Japan, and we saw this major shift here, where now they won the majority. What she wants to do is to have stronger borders. She has great borders anyway, but not allow immigration, not allow woke, not allow all the trans issues, all the different things that we have allowed in America. She wants to stop before they ever happen. And a lot of people thought she was taking a huge risk in doing this, but President Trump's endorsement pushed her over the edge. And now she has what we would call a super majority to begin to establish Japan in what I call a Judeo-Christian value formation in the land, and we should celebrate that and pray for them. And of course, we're going to Japan in May, and we have my son and his wife there, and our grandchild's there. So this was an exciting day for me when I heard that she won the election. So I think that's an important issue as we move forward with that.
And it also gives us a stronger ally in the region, with some dynamics that we won't have time to deal with it today, of what's going on internally in China, of a possible coup that's playing out there, and then buildup of Thailand and Taiwan and et cetera, stuff like that, things of those nature. So while things are happening and the focus is somewhat on Iran, and obviously with the protests and things happening here in America and the Super Bowl and all that stuff, there's positive things happening throughout the world. And I think you brought up a great point of the weight, and your dream speaks of that, the weight that goes upon a president, and a president of his age. And yeah, he's amazing to have the energy that he has and the pace that he moves. But if you're constantly under that day after day after day, it's not just for him, it's for his people who are trying to keep up with him. Because if they can't keep up, then they're going to leave. They're going to be burned out because their bodies can't handle it, because they're not used to that pace. You put somebody in there who may not, cooperate with them, because they've had great cooperation with the people that they put in. And so it's really not, it's for President Trump, but then those downfall of him down his window, who, they need supernatural energy and ability to take care of themselves, not only health-wise, spiritually, but then also in dietary, et cetera, things like that. So it's a full encompassing circle of the prayers that are needed, and very important for us here as we head into the midterms here later this year.
And a feel-good video for us as we close out today from the best ad in the Super Bowl, if you ask me. About America. So I want to play that. Enjoy this.
After 250 years, the American experiment still isn't finished. It's been built, tested, carried forward, and fought for. And we passed it on, hand to hand, life to life. Generations ago, ordinary people risked everything to begin it. 250 years later, the work continues, because freedom is worth it. This year, America turns 250.
Made by Angel Studios, which I like.
After 250
that is amazing video, I think, but I think it was the best ad of the entire Super Bowl. So we celebrate that. We celebrate what happened there, and sorry. There we go. Sorry, I lost my mic there. But we celebrate America. This is our 5th Jubilee. That's very important. As we celebrate this year, July 4th will be our 5th Jubilee. So we're believing for breakthrough by July 4. We have a lot of prophetic about that, but we're going to pour into you. Thank you for being a part of that and being a part of this today with us here on the Pipeline Report. Well, we'll see you again next Monday, same time, same Holy Ghost channel here at Christian Center Shreveport, but on our Pipeline page. We thank you for doing that. Share this with others, and let's pray together for the purpose and the covenant purpose of our nation in the earth as we see God touching America. God bless you. We'll see you next week.